No.
So straight in two sets of meetings, two sets of meeting minutes. Just this for the to the confidential bit. That's fine. That's the end of it. Welcome to this ordinary meeting of Council number 4445. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet and the waters that surround us, and pay my respect to elders past and present.
We thank you, Lord, for the honour of being called by our fellow citizens to this office of honour and trust. Give us grace, diligently and honourably, free from private interest or prejudice, to discharge the duties entrusted to us to the common good and in your sight, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Please have a seat. Welcome everybody. We have no apologies. Are there any declarations of interest? We have some minutes of two meetings. Move them separately or together? Separately?
Separate.
Councillor McLaughlin, Councillor Williams.
With a slight amendment, if I could, Mr. Mayor.
Sure.
On the second set of minutes for the extraordinary meeting, part 2, a little bit left off the end, after standard contract, and affix the seal of council to the documents, it should say.
So that's the meeting.
That's the second meeting.
4444. Is that amendment clear?
I thought we were just dealing with the first set of minutes.
I thought they'd been put together.
No.
Want to do them separately? We'll deal with the first one then. First set of minutes, Councillor McLaughlin, Councillor Williams, no amendments to that. Any discussion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. In relation to 13.4 in the minutes, which is about the Bonifan Road parking, I'd like to move that Council resolve to hold a further meeting with the community to discuss the proposal.
So there was no formal resolution to hold a meeting.
Well, according to the General Manager, but I believe that it's important that we do, so I'm moving that we do that to clarify it for the General Manager.
Second, and Councillor Crassoy. Is there anybody wish to speak against that? Any further discussion? Councillor Sanderson, did you want to speak? I'll put that. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. So we move to the second set of minutes in there with the General Manager's
I'd like to ask a question in relation to 13.3.
13.3.
In the first set of minutes relating to my question without notice concerning the development at 10 Milling Street. The answer that's been given doesn't explain fully the extended length of the storeroom. As that was originally approved by Council in November, the length of the storeroom in that development was going to be 4 metres. On the drawings that exist at the present time, it's now 5.4. There has been reduction in the length of the carport. I would have thought that in terms of the streetscape, which the answer refers to, a better solution would have been for the storeroom to stay at the 4 metres as it was approved, and for the carport to be lengthened. I'm sure the carport would have interfered less with that side of the heritage item than the storeroom being extended. I note also that the storeroom has now got a large door on it rather than the original door that was originally approved. The result is that potentially that storeroom could be used as a garage. Council specifically deleted the garage from that application, and now the potential is there for it to reappear. So the question I would ask, and wasn't answered in the question I asked of the General Manager, is how did this process come about by which this storeroom was extended by that amount?
Your question of the General Manager?
Well, it was answered by the
Mr.
Group
Crevers.
Manager for Development Control.
Mr. Crevers?
The answer is addressed in that paragraph where it says, in order to achieve the lightweight structure to meet the condition. So therefore, the architect, the applicant, had to provide an open type structure in a form of a carport, and the carport's 5.4, they're the lengths, and the structure had to be, the way the structure had to be lightweight, therefore the carport width had to be reduced, which entailed, probably increased the, from memory, increased the existing storage area from about 1 metre or 1.2 metre. That's basically the reasoning for it. It did address the intent of the recommendation, and we just worked off what the recommendation is on the night, which was taken from the floor. There was no specific details to confirm or refer back to the sides of widths or carport, sides of widths of storage rooms, and there was a roller door from memory. I've got the plans in front, but there was a roller door on the storage component of the proposal. I believe strongly that the plans approved were in accordance with the intent of the resolution of the night in regards to the wording of the resolution of the night.
Thank you, Mr. Crevers.
And can I just add, we've explained this to Mr. and Mrs. Crook numerous times, emails, letters, and only just the other day they've put a letter from their lawyer, and our lawyers will respond to them accordingly.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Sanson.
Mr. Mayor, I'm afraid that still doesn't answer my question. The roller door was part of the garage development. That was also specifically excluded on the night that matter was determined. And the fact that the carport's been reduced in length, I wouldn't have thought is an issue. It could have remained as long as it was, and I don't think it would have made much difference structurally. But my question is, how did the storeroom come to be increased by length by 1.4 metres, giving it the potential to be used as a garage when council had specifically deleted the garage?
Through you, Mayor, like I said before, there is no roller door proposed on the carport component from memory. That's not part of the approval. There is a roller door. There was a roller door to the storage, which is, I believe, still there and part of the initial application from memory. And I've dealt with this a number of weeks and from memory. How it came about is as explained in that paragraph.
If I can, Mr Mayor, if this matter is now the subject of
Legal.
I don't think we should discuss it any further.
Yep. Would you like some more information at another time to clarify the issue?
I think it would be helpful. Thank you,
All right,
Mr. Mayor.
let's do that.
Some plans.
I would just like to have a clarification about whether a roll door actually was part of the initial approval.
Well, that's probably something we can do a bit of research after the meeting, perhaps. Are you happy with that? We leave that till after the meeting? I think it is, and it's worth considering the legal action. Thank you. Thank you, councillor. So, are there any further queries or questions on these minutes? Any further comments?
Sorry, Mr Mayor, we're now voting on the first set of minutes.
We're still with that. We've had 2 queries on them. Any further queries? Any questions? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you. And the mover was Councillor McLaughlin and Councillor Williams. So the second set of minutes, Councillor Williams and Councillor Miles. And there was an amendment to the...
Just to add on point 2, to add that to affix the seal of council to the documents.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Miles, thank you. All in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you very much. The next matter we have is 3.1, recognising Hunters Hill Day and our local song Mookaboola. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's with great disappointment that I withdraw this motion. I withdraw it on the basis that I don't believe I have the support of council, sufficient support of council, to have such an important issue carried tonight.
All right, thank you. Councillor Williams, I think this is a very important issue. You're right. I think this is a very important day that we mark it year on year. And I think that through a bit more consultation, I'm sure we can find a way to recognise this day, which is very important in the history of this council. Thank you.
Can I put an alternative motion?
You can.
No, you can't.
No, you can't.
Point of order, Mr Mayor.
Well,
Point of order.
Can't.
It's a motion, motion, and I've withdrawn.
You've withdrawn it. He's withdrawn it, so it's gone.
In those 2.
So
Well, that's a shame.
it is gone. I'm interested to hear what it was. I'll talk to you later. We go to 4.1, Delegated Authority Report.
Not the subject of another.
Do I have a mover for 4.1, the Delegated Authority Report? I'll move 4.1, the Delegated Authority Report. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Miles. Thank you, Councillor Miles. Is there any discussion on this report? Any questions? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? In favour, let me try again. Those in favour of the report? Against? Carried. Thank you. 4.2, the Development Control Unit Report on page 9. Moved Councillor Miles, seconded Councillor Williams. Are there any questions? Are there any comments? Clarifications? Moved. I'll put that. Those in favour? Against? That's carried.
Just so the council's aware, because it will be something for the new general manager to consider. At the moment, when the Development Control Unit considers reports, I chair the DCU. So the decisions are made by the general manager, they're not delegated. The new general manager will have to decide whether they want to continue that or they want to give the delegation somewhere else. What I've tried to do is to make those parts of those meetings run exactly as we would with a council meeting. If we hear objectors, we hear applicants. If we feel it's necessary to go and do a site inspection, we do. So everyone has the same opportunity to address the meeting as they would if it was a council meeting. It seems to be working quite well. I had some very good feedback.
Right, thank you. 4.3 is the local planning panel. Councillor Williams, moved Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor Miles. Councillor Williams.
Could I speak to this, please, Mr Mayor? And I know Councillor Sanderson was able to attend the meeting, so he's probably got a better view of what took place. But I do express my concern. We're receiving and noting this report because that is the only position we have to take. But I do express my concern from the reports I got in relation to the process which the panel went through. There was no opportunity for the community, if they were present, to be able to hear why the decisions were made. They were just proclaimed, and I think that is a terribly unfair way of doing things. And I would urge the panel to be more forthright and embrace the community in this process. The second issue that I have in relation to it, the local planning panels, is we have an item that's going up to this meeting this week for the local planning panel, which is a removal of a tree with no objections, with no exceeding any of the criteria. I'm just perplexed as to why the LPP is starting to consider isolated trees as being something of, I would have thought council would be well equipped to be able to deal with that.
Through you, Mayor, it's a criteria of the LPP because it's our land, council's land, it's a conflict, so they're all matters of conflict go to the LPP.
When you say it's our land,
It's a tree on our land.
a street tree.
No, it's not, it's in the subject site.
Okay. My point still is there in relation to the process and the ability of us to understand the decision
I can
making
probably
process.
help with that.
Gentlemen,
Look, I was aware of some concerns after the last meeting, and before the meeting, I had to talk to the chairman. So, as from this meeting, the LPP panel will be live streamed, so people will be able to see.
But that still doesn't resolve the issue if they don't want to say anything.
I have spoken to the chairman, and I think you'll find that the meeting will be quite well run.
Would hope it's an improvement on us.
thanks for raising it, Councillor Williams. We'll see how we go this week. Councillor Sanderson, did you have something you wanted to comment?
If I could add to Councillor Williams' comments, I was the only councillor present at that meeting of the LPV, which is the first which they made any kind of development decision. As the minutes show, the meeting opened at 4 p.m, closed at 4:05 p.m, and most of the time was taken up with introductions of members of the panel. As Councillor Williams has said, the chairman simply announced the decisions. Yes, the vote was available in the report that came along later. But I have great difficulty with this because this is permitted under legislation as the Act has been renumbered. The provision that allows this to occur is in Schedule 2 of the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act, Clause 26. This is a clause that we expressed concern about when we were debating how we're going to handle local planning panels. I think I also have great concern not just with the performance of the panel, but also with the legislation itself. I'd like to see, further discussion to have this reviewed or appealed as we demanded at the time. I think it's just unacceptable that a panel is able to just simply announce its decision. The reason I actually came to that meeting was I was looking forward to hearing what members of our community said, and I was very disappointed there were no speakers. And we've lost a lot in the process because even if there were no speakers, if there were people sitting in the gallery, I know from the brief experience I've had of making development decisions on the earlier part of this council that the result is that even if no one speaks, if you are in argument and you say something that's either approved or disapproved of, you get a feeling from the gallery as to what the attitude is. But the local planning panel are not locals. We have one local rep, and the difficulty is that they even miss out on that sort of interaction that I think councillors might understand. So again, I have my concerns with this process. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Noted. Is there anybody else who wish to speak on this matter? So we have a move and a second. I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? That's carried. Thank you. Okay. Mr. Creeper's just pointed out to me that you have a paper on your table which relates to this with a 4.4. Do you all have that document? And the reason for that was, Steve, there was an error in the photocopying on this section here which should have trimmed off some of the page.
It left off the last two columns in relation to costs. Everything else is-
So that's item 4.4, report on legal matters. Do you have a mover? Councillor Collins, seconded Councillor McLaughlin. Are there any queries, anything you'd like to clarify?
Can I just make some comments?
Councillor
in relation
McLaughlin?
To the amount of legal matters we have at present. I was going through them and we have, of the 22 matters currently before the L&E or under legal action, 15 are from 2018 alone. Is this an unusual spike in the number of court actions?
Yeah, under class ones, very unusual. We put it down to the economy, boosting the economy, and persons not waiting in line to have their application assessed. And some of those applications, as you're probably aware, through CAP, are not in compliance or fully compliance with the LEP DCP. So they either want to jump the line or the economics of scale with regard to the value of their property versus appealing this matter in the Land Environment Court overweighs it as well, unfortunately.
Yeah, what's 100 grand in a $5 million project?
Well,
That's not encouraging.
I raise it because we have recently reduced our legal budget, I think, moving forward.
Yes.
And we are going to have to address that if this is going to be an ongoing issue. We don't want to have to, we want to be able to fight these. So if our legal budget needs to be increased, then it needs to be increased. Anyway, just a
Thank you,
comment.
Councillor McLaughlin.
There we go.
I think our budget's our budget, but we may have to take some money from somewhere else. Any further discussion on this? Councillor Williams.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Now that I've got this report, I can actually see the details of fees and monies involved in this. I note that there are 1, 2, 3, 4 items that relate to the amalgamation issue. Is that right, or is
That's correct,
why have we got 4 different items?
because they're 4 separate actions.
Right.
And some of those actions are the joint actions that we took with other councils, and the fees shown there are the total costs, not necessarily our costs.
The last column, what does that tell us?
That's the disbursements. So the fees are the fees we pay to our lawyers, the disbursements are fees we pay to others. So for instance, at that column where the fees are quite high, that would be where we've paid our barristers and other legal people that assisted us.
Right. So we're looking at the total of those two. And do we have any indication as to when the government is going to honour the court ruling?
In one of those, I think, so if you go to page 23, the advice is that currently negotiating the cost, Crown Solicitor has been provided with a spreadsheet of all HW or amalgamation costs for the three councils. Council Solicitors wrote a letter on the 31st of July seeking copies of council's invoices for Hunters Hill, Lancaster, Strathfield as well as Mossman. So the Crown Solicitor is suggesting that the arrangement we had with our barrister, for example, was that the barrister would charge us a fee and we would split it 3 ways. Crown Solicitor is trying to argue that we actually didn't have that arrangement and he actually charged us 3 fees. So unless they can see the original invoice, they're not prepared to pay.
Well, it's very disappointing that we've got
on and
12
on
months
and
down
on.
the
I
track.
know.
The court ruled that the government is to pay the cost and we're still arguing and nitpicking from the government end.
Yep.
It's really quite sad.
Sad.
Okay. Any further comments? So that was moved by you, Councillor Collins. Is there anything you'd like to say?
Look,
You're okay?
it's all good, yeah.
All right, thank you. If there's no further discussion, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you. We're up to item 4.5, Hunters Hill Council successful prosecution, unlawful tree removal. Page 32, recommendation 34, Councillor Williams.
I'd like to move the recommendation that the report be received and noted.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Seconded, Councillor Miles. Councillor Williams.
Mr Mayor, this is not the only case where council has been successful in prosecuting unlawful tree removal. It reflects council's desire and the community's desire to maintain our treated environment. And people shouldn't shortcut the process. People should go through the formal process and accept the decision of council or its community in terms of what trees can and can't be removed. So this is a very important statement by the courts. The council needs to be respected in that process and needs to be adhered to. And these fines and costs are not unsubstantial. They're substantial fines, and we've had in recent months very equally significant, if not greater, fines for people that wish to disobey the law and the rules in relation to trees. So I think this reflects the importance which council places on its tree canopy and its treated environment, and I would bring this to the attention of the community so that people understand the need to go through the appropriate process if they wish to lock, trim or remove trees. And council is the appropriate point for them to come for that information and the approval process.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. I agree with you. Okay. Is there any further discussion on this? Any other comments? Councillor McLaughlin.
I'd just like to add to Councillor Williams, congratulate Council on pursuing this as far as they did. And I'm also pleased to note that in the judgment, it talks about a timetable for reviewing the maintenance and health of the trees that actually have to be replaced. And I think that is a very important part of the ongoing prosecution of these issues. Because all too often the fines are paid but the trees are not put back in, or they are put back in and then they are not watered, if we might say that. So I think it's very important that the judgment has dates in there for following up on whether those trees are actually maintaining their health and viability.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any further comments? I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? That's carried. Thank you. Item 6.1, completion of water refill stations installation. Moved Councillor Miles, seconded Councillor Crasso. Councillor Miles.
Mr Mayor, could I just perhaps also add a thank you to council staff in there. This is something that I know particularly at Boronia Park was very much needed, and the clubs at Boronia Park have talked about the need for water refill stations and bubblers at the park for some time, so they're very relieved that this has now been installed, so it's actually a great outcome for the community.
Right, thank you, Councillor Miles. Is there any further discussion on this? Any other comments? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, against, that's carried. Right, on 8.1, the appointment of the Internal Audit Committee. Moved Councillor Miles, seconded Councillor Collins.
And could I just add, Mr Mayor, that the number 4, the chairperson is paid an initial fee of $250.
Is that an amendment to?
Yes, it was blank.
Where should that go?
It was blank.
Oh, okay, 250.
And I was supposed to go back and fill it in. Or nothing.
I met the candidates at this meeting, and I think Councillor Collins met one of the candidates in particular, and I was very impressed with the candidate, young candidate, 28 years of age, very impressive, and I think she'll serve us very well on this committee. Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Mr Mayor, can I ask a question, please? Why do we pay people to be on this committee when the subsequent committee about the library, etc., and all our other committees, we don't pay people? Is there some legal requirement to do that? Because I find it extraordinary that these people are signalled out while everybody else contributes to our advisory committee voluntarily.
There is a requirement that they are paid, given the amount of work that they actually have to put into, even though they only meet 4 times a year. If you have a look at the charter for the Internal Audit Committee, is an extensive amount of work that they have to put into reviewing and setting an audit plan and a whole range of other things. So the fee we're charging, I can say, is quite reasonable compared to what other councils pay. We are at very much the lower end of the scale.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you.
Councillor Sanderson.
Is there anybody? Councillor Sanderson.
Could I just ask one other question?
Yes.
Is it the 5,000 per annum that's going to cost council budgeted for?
Yes.
Thank you. Good question. We've got to focus on that for the next 12 months. Is it budgeted for? Any further questions, clarifications? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. I think we've got item 9.1 next, the library working party.
No.
Not 9.1?
8.2.
Well, I missed one, have I?
8.2.
Thank you.
Sailing club licence agreement.
I did.
Mr Mayor, can I?
Was that the item you happen to be waiting for?
It is.
Mr Mayor, can I just perhaps ask before we have a move and second to the General Manager just to run through this with me?
Yeah, happy to do that.
Yeah.
I think it's all pretty much laid out in the report. I've been having some ongoing discussions with the Sailing Club relating to maintenance to the pontoon and the walkway to the pontoon. It was only installed in 2015, I think is right, and certainly we underestimated the potential maintenance costs, particularly as it's been caused by, we all know it's coming from the ferry wash. So even though the brackets were heavily engineered to hold the thing to the shore, they're not working, they've broken. There are some other damages that have happened. If the Sailing Club waits for us to get our act together to have 3 quotes, because that's our policy, go through all the rigmarole, in summer when they're racing they can't wait. So the idea is the club's happy to take over the maintenance. I'm happy to be out of it, and it's the club's responsibility. The offset is that we don't charge them the 20% return commission on functions that they have, and if you look at the numbers there, what they've made just about offsets what they've paid out in maintenance anyway, so they can afford to do it. I think it's a great opportunity. It's it's a wonderful outcome for a community group prepared to take over, bearing the costs of their own, for their responsibility. It's great.
Councillor Miles moved, Councillor Miles, seconded Councillor Cresswell.
Can I just ask a couple of questions?
You can. Councillor McLaughlin.
At the moment, who has the public liability insurance on the pontoon? Will that move to the club?
No, we'll still do that. Otherwise, they'll have to pay the cost. So it's easy for us to do.
All right, so that's...
We'll just cover under our policies. Yeah.
And I understand...
It's our asset.
Right. So I understand the reason why we had the pontoon separated out from the original licence agreement was because it was a grant, is that right?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
And I assume, Mr General Manager,
Councillor Miles.
that the amending of the licence is just at the request of the club, so that they can host events or...
Yeah, it's just easy to make it all clean. Yeah.
Councillor Williams.
Mr Mayor, I'm just curious as to why the pontoon wasn't built to a specification that met its environment. Why does it have to have ongoing maintenance to this extent? Why can't it be rectified and the matter resolved?
I think it's fair to say, and I'm sure Mr Quinlan will help me if it's necessary, the specification was based on all the knowledge that was available at the time, and it was thought that it was more than suitable for the purpose. I don't think anyone understood the impact potentially of the ferries or the ferry wash, and it's now come to light. My understanding is that it's called the repair that the club is now looking at will provide for a much more solid, for want of a better term, fix than what was available before, and that should hopefully ameliorate the problem, because clearly they don't want an ongoing maintenance cost, neither do we. So if we fix it once and fix it right, we should be okay.
But why do we then waive our rights to the hall rental, which is a commercial activity, if it's going to be fixed once and there's no ongoing cost?
There are other things happening now. It's not just those. If you look at some are in here, they've identified some other problems as well with the tendering. I think it's called the tenders, aren't they? No, it's in here.
So it'll keep happening.
There are other maintenance issues anyway, and again, but it's just the ability for the club to act and get it done as quickly as possible, and not have to go through our rigmarole. I think it's reasonable based on the figures that there's an offset there. It's reviewed every 5 years, so if we find in 5 years' time it's not working to everyone's advantage, we'll go back and we'll have a look at another look at it.
Mr Mayor, I find it rather curious that if this was only put in a couple of years ago, we've known for the last 20 years the problems associated with these ferries, why it wasn't designed to cope with that situation. And I find it rather extraordinary that we're faced with this dilemma at this moment based on classic engineering solutions to obvious and ongoing problems. I do think that a one-off repair is required rather than a change to the lease arrangement.
So I have a question, if I could. Who did the original designs for the pontoon? Was
it was a
consulting engineering practice?
It was a consulting marine engineer who I think, if I'm correct, is a local.
Please.
Can I move?
Who would be?
Yes, Councillor Miles, Councillor Collins.
Who was very familiar with the local conditions.
So can you help us out with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So just so that you're aware, when this
Please stand
was
up.
first,
Please, sorry. My hearing's terrible.
when this was first implemented, it was implemented to the very best design possible and to the best advice possible. Okay, what we found is the ferry wash over the years has been increasing. The number of ferry traffic, the number of ferries, and the wash has gotten worse. What we've done is we've now consulted with marine engineer company who have advised us on making the brackets more solid. There's actually going to be more bolts involved. However, we're not the only ones that are having this issue. many ramps and pontoons along the harbour foreshore are having this problem as well. So what we're doing is we have got a design for the best possible solution that's known at the moment. In addition to this, however, we've got fenders that do need replacing on a regular basis. These are the edging around, and that is pine that is designed to actually be sacrificed over a period of time, so you do need to replace that. The pylons themselves, the sleeves have also deteriorated, so they need replacing, and we're putting the thickest possible sleeves we can on that. But even though you put the best possible now, they will likely need replacing again in 5 years' time. That's the nature of the waterway that we're on, unfortunately. So that's why we are seeking to, do undertake the repairs as needed, because we as a sailing club suffer if we can't have this in working condition. When the ramp did collapse, it was quite frightening actually, and once we got it replaced, but while we're waiting for it to be replaced, we actually had to have another provision in place where we had ribs ferrying our rescue people onto the boats on the pontoon and then back. If the weather was such that there might be a risk of rescues needing to be undertaken, we had to stop sailing operations because it was too risky to do it without the ramp in action. So for us, it was really important to have this maintained regularly, and to be able to do that in the best way possible. But the cost is pretty much offset with what we're getting in the hall rental.
Thank you, Ms. Quinlan.
Thank you.
Councillor Williams, do you have a question?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. If it's blatantly a problem caused by Sydney Ferries, why aren't we seeking redress from Sydney Ferries? They paid for seawalls, they paid for a whole range of declared problems. They're aware of their impact on the harbour. Why isn't that approach being taken?
General Manager?
I can advise that Sydney Ferries have not paid for any seawalls in Hunters Hill. They deny any liability whatsoever.
I was just wondering also, if council is foregoing its ability to tender and whatever, how are we sure that we're getting the best price if there's going to be no tender process and people are just going to...
The best price for what?
For the repairs. We're foregoing our percentage of the rental to allow the repairs to be taken place. Now, how can we ensure that we get the best value for those repairs, and that's reflected in what we're foregoing?
Well,
Sorry?
we're not paying for it. They're paying
No,
for
but we're discounting those repairs from the hall rental.
You're wondering how they're commensurate, the two things?
No, we're foregoing the rental
Yeah.
on the basis of repairs. And the general manager indicated that we've got a rigorous process that we go through, and that delays the repairs.
Yes.
What I'm suggesting, if we're basing the costing of the repairs and offsetting that against a return or a revenue we're getting, then surely that has to be based on sound practices in terms of the costing of the repairs.
Well, I would expect that the club would do exactly the same. They might,
So
I doubt they would just take one quote. They would probably get at least two, but they can just do it. It's much more efficient and faster if the club do that themselves. It's as simple as that, and it's in the club's interest to make sure they're getting their best value for money, because they're only going to have a certain amount of money that they can spend on their repairs.
I think your argument is counter to what you said before, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Does anybody have any questions of Ms. Quinlan before we move on? Anybody have any more questions? So, it's moved by Councillor Miles. Councillor Miles, would you like to say anything further?
It looks pretty straightforward to me, Mr. Mayor. As the General Manager said, it's pretty well outlined. I don't know why the club wouldn't seek the right quote, and it sounds like it's going to be an ongoing maintenance issue, as many of the harbour pieces of infrastructure are. So I don't have a problem with this. We're still getting a rental return from the sailing club using the facilities. in the future. Sorry, Mr. General Manager, when is 5 years until the lease is up?
That's a review.
And we can review that, and we can review what maintenance is or isn't happening at that point.
Any further questions or queries? Councillor
I would just
McLaughlin.
like to add that, yes, we will have the chance to review the revenue as well at that point when we review it at the, I think we're a year into the current licence. I think we're already a year into the current licence, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yes. And I did want to add that this issue did cause the Sailing Club quite a lot of angst earlier in the year, and the delay was substantial from the council's perspective, but only because of the processes that council has to undertake. So this sailing club has brought a lot of benefit to our community, so I think it's good for us to be able to provide something back to them and to partner with them on this issue.
Okay, I think the issue here that we need to consider also is the safety aspect of this, and there is quite a serious issue for safety when this fails, or if this were to fail in the future. And I think this is a way to help the club ensure the safety of the people that use that pontoon and use the boat. So I'm very happy to support this. So I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Quinlan. 9.1 is the Library Working Party, page 95. Moved Councillor Miles, seconded Councillor McLaughlin. Councillor Miles.
Mr. Mayor, obviously this is something that we've talked about quite at length. I think that there is a consensus, and there were some fireworks, I understand, at the last meeting. There is a consensus, I think, that something needs to be done this term about the library and perhaps the agreement with RIDE, and for Hunters Hill to at least explore its options and have a good hard look at what service is being provided. I'm happy to jump on this committee if council is of a mind, and it says here that we have three members, and obviously there's going to be substantial community interest in this as well. I think that were we to exit the library agreement with RIDE, it is going to take a lot of preparation. We've had briefings saying that were we to get rid of the library service, that would require a referendum. No one, I think, at council is suggesting that we get rid of the library service. This motion, and I think this working party is designed to improve the library service and look at our options. So I'm happy to move it, and as I said, if council is of a mind, I'm happy to jump on the committee.
Thank you, Councillor Miles.
Party.
Thank you. Is anybody wishing to speak against this library working party? Are there any clarifications? Can I put the motion? I'll
We
put.
need to
We have
nominate
the three
councillors.
councils.
We can. Well,
We can include that in the motion.
could I? Your suggestions from the
Call
floor?
for nominations.
I'd like to be involved in it.
Well, you're
If you-
you're ex officio.
And ex officio, I'd like to be involved. Councillor Williams, is this something you'd like to be involved in?
Not necessarily, but
Okay.
I'll do it if I have to.
Right, is there anybody else who would like to sit on
I'd be
this?
happy to do it, yeah.
Councillor Collins, great.
Yes.
That's fabulous. Thank you.
And who else?
One more?
Three, yeah.
Councillor Crasso. Thank you, Councillor Crasso. So we've got it. I'd like to attend those meetings, so there might be four of us there. So I think it's really important. I think, if I may speak at this stage, I think that libraries are more than just libraries, and libraries are more than just books at the moment. And if we look at spaces that go with libraries, and how that might play out over the next 5 or 6 years, then I think we'll have an impact on social isolation and other things that are happening in the community at the moment. And I'm happy to talk about that another time. But I think this is a good thing to do. So I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you. 9.2, I think we've got next. Conservation Advisory Panel, page 103.
I'll move it.
Move Councillor Williams. Seconded Councillor Crasso. Councillor Williams.
Mr Mayor, I think it's important to note in this report 2 issues, and one in particular is 18 Richmond Crescent, which Council was involved in Land and Environment Court proceedings, and there was a very clear decision made by the Land and Environment Court in Council's favour in relation to that. And what the panel has tried to reflect in its advice clearly is in the spirit of that Land and Environment Court decision, particularly in terms of the way that the existing fabric of the original building is dealt with, the need to have very close oversight in relation to a conservation's work schedule. And it's more than just your typical building process. So I think the committee or the advisory panel has very carefully and very clearly articulated a series of things which are necessary to be met in the spirit of the court case, as well as, or the outcome of the court, as well as the long-term fabric and conservation of that important building. The second issue that I'll bring to Council's attention is 4.1, which really disappointed the panel. It tried to constructively engage with the Vision Stream people, and consequently the Commonwealth Telecommunication Act was invoked, and the implementation of the installation was carried out without any further consideration of the heritage or conservation aspects of that location. So that was rather disappointing, and just shows how heavy-handed Commonwealth legislation can be, and in my belief certainly wasn't used to good effect in that particular case. So the committee had the panel had a very busy meeting and was very constructive and considered in its views.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Are there any other comments on these? I'd like to ask Mr. Karipas to speak on 3.3, if I might. I was involved in some of the meetings on site. Mr. Karipas.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to reiterate and echo what Councillor Williams said, where we did spend a lot of time on the court case and the importance of the heritage fabric and the conservation area, not only conservation area, and also the landscape conservation area in that particular that site. Having said that, we spent a bit of time even further with regard to any new works proposed by a new owner or applicant or architect, that the significant character and fabric of the building is not interrupted and preserved, and that includes roof elements and also internal structures. And we've made it very clear that not only we want a conservation works schedule, but we want a person on board with heritage skills that will report back to the council and the certifier and being on site, ensuring that every little component of the most important heritage fabric is conserved and built correctly. And we're reflecting that back to the current architect or builder, and we'll be very firm with this. And this is another point, going back to what Councillor McLaughlin said, these are the cases we have to spend money and fight on, These are the conservation and heritage items that we need to ensure that respect our LEP, the aims and objectives of the LEP with our heritage component of it. And it's unfortunate we're getting a lot of class ones, as we call them, and most of those are in conservation areas and attached to heritage items in this particular case. So there's twofold to that approach. And I just want to add, again, very frustrating, some stern letters from council to Vision Stream with regard to their arrogant approach with bullying their application through. And their thoughts of consultation was basically just meeting us, not taking on board our comments and our concerns, which is very frustrating. Can I just highlight, and councillors will see in my emails and submissions very, very shortly, that we've just received numerous applications for this type of development in the municipality, which we've written to them at this stage, and also one in particular separately outside the council chambers in front of here, 22 Alexander Street, and I'll be bringing those as a late item to the CAP meeting this Wednesday. But I've also activated in the spirit of what CAP talked about last night. I don't want to miss out on the timing of the whole thing. Again, unknown where they are, unknown the type, unknown the structure, what it looks like and how it impacts, and no consideration, no respect with regard to the conservation of our area.
Thank you, Mr. Krebs. Any questions of Mr. Krebs on the matter? Thank you. We've got to move in a second. If there's no further comments, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you. 9.3, 111.
I'll move the recommendation. Just note there is a part 2 to that recommendation.
Councillor McLaughlin moved. Councillor McLaughlin seconded. Councillor Miles. And this minutes be received and known. Council seeks formal approval from RMS to wrap traffic signal boxes.
That's right. So we just want to roll out that process to other utility boxes throughout the municipality.
Right. Are there any questions?
Yes.
Councillor Williams.
I'm just wondering, is the NBN node process now complete? Because I noticed there's one on Ryde Road that hasn't been wrapped. I was just wondering if they're all going to be wrapped or just a few.
Councillor McLaughlin.
I can answer that. The wrappings were only in respect of conservation areas. That was part of the process. So anything that is outside, any NBN boxes that are outside of the conservation areas are not being wrapped at this point, but certainly that would be part of the process we would want to go through. Traffic signal boxes in this recommendation is probably incorrect. I would probably put it as all utility boxes or utility boxes in the municipality in general, because we would certainly want to move towards trying to wrap those if we could.
So utility NBN wrap?
Well, no, I would just say wrap. Well, I would say from RMS to investigate the wrapping of utility boxes across the municipality.
Under different utility organisations, not RMS.
Okay, could we go through it again?
So I didn't actually.
Council seeks formal approval to the RMS to
wrap traffic signal boxes and
Remaining NBN boxes.
seek approvals from other relevant agencies in relation to other utility boxes. Does that make sense?
I will make it work.
Councillor Williams, did you have a comment?
I don't want to labour the point, but I was just wondering for clarification, that box on the southern side of Ryde Road, I would imagine, is in the conservation area. Could maybe the planning officer tell me? The conservation area runs along Ryde Road, as I understand.
Are we talking about the village?
No, we're talking about near Abigail Street,
Yeah, okay.
Oh, okay.
short of Mary Street.
It's on Abigail's side.
No, it's on the Joey's College side. It's
What-
near the school.
Yeah, from memory, it might drop off there. I know it drops off towards.
Anyway, worth a look.
We'll look it up. Take a
I
note.
know they looked at the,
No,
where the conservation areas.
Any further questions or queries on this? Mr. Miles, do you accept that change?
Yes, that's fine.
Right, thank you. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. Too late, sorry. I'm sorry I missed you if I did. Did you have something you'd like to say?
Nothing.
Okay, thank you. Comment then. Would you like to make a comment?
I would have liked to have made it.
Please make a comment.
I just, again, and we have before, but I really want to commend the Public Art Committee for sticking with this project. I receive lots of comments. From friends and members of the community about how unique they are and how interesting they are. And I've mentioned to people that you're seeking to roll them out further, and that's exciting. I would really welcome, as the chair of both Main Street committees, I would really welcome the Public Art Committee to come along and present it and seek opportunities for further funding and sponsorship at those. And I look forward to seeing the signal boxes and the street libraries advertised and promoted so that people really understand, particularly the libraries, really understand how to use them, because I see them in other cities and I'm not sure people really understand how to use them. So I'm looking forward to seeing all of that happen, and I know you're all over it.
Take a book, leave a book, leave a book, take a book.
Thank you, Councillor. It's a good comment. So, 9.4 we're up to. The minutes of the Inclusive Playground Working Party. Moved Councillor Crasso, seconded Councillor Collins. Are there any questions or queries on that? I have a query. There doesn't seem to be anything in here about funding, which has been an issue of contention for a while. Do we know where the funding is coming from?
We met, as it says, and we discussed plans to date and the process to date. Where it's at the moment is we're waiting for community consultation to come back to put the final design to seek the funding we need.
I see.
But within that community consultation, some other ideas of avenues for funding have also come up.
Okay.
Touched by Olivia are taking ownership of that funding seeking and seem confident that they'll secure it for us.
Okay. I wonder if we might add that as a section in the minutes so that we start to track it.
Yeah,
I have a slight concern that we're raising community expectations, but we don't have the funding. So I think it's a fair question. If you're in agreement, perhaps we could add that to the next set of minutes. All right, are there any further comments or questions? I'll put the motion, minutes received and noted. That's passed, thank you. Minutes of the Precinct Committee held on 31st of July, 9.5. Moved Councillor Crasso, seconded Councillor McLaughlin. Councillor Crasso.
Mr. Mayor, I'm really excited about the establishment of a precinct roadshow for Hunters Hill. We've all of us at various stages in various shapes talked about the importance of open communication between residents and councillors, and precinct meetings or some kind of localised meeting concept has been on our minds for some time. I feel that these roadshows that we hatched at this meeting will be a great opportunity to introduce our new General Manager to the community and to immerse them in every sub-region of our community, and for our community to meet them and let them know their concerns straight up. For us as councillors, this first series of meetings will be a great opportunity to hear what sort of shape our community would like these opportunities to be in future. So I note here that we are looking to, after these series of meetings, actually continue precinct meetings in some shape as formed between us and our community at that first set of meetings, if I didn't just word that too convolutedly. So the fact that we're having one in every little sub-region and that everyone's welcome to all of them if they want to come to all of them, and that the GM will be there, I think it's a really exciting step forward into what we worked on so hard in our community strategic plan.
Thank you, Councillor Crasso. Any further comments? Councillor Williams, sorry.
Oh, sorry, I just wanted
Councillor Williams first, thank you.
Okay.
Mr Mayor, I'd just like to echo Councillor Crassoy's comments. I think it's important that we do reach out and engage with our community, and there's no better way than doing that than to have some public forums where people can come and collectively discuss issues, raise issues, and inform council of what the particular part of the municipality is thinking. I also like the way that it's been structured. There's no boundaries as such. It's an open forum. If you live in Woolwich and you've got a question or an interest in something that's going on at Baronia Park or whatever, then you're free to come along and you're welcome to come along. So it's a real opportunity for the community to engage, not only with the council but with themselves. And I think this is going to be an excellent way into the future for us to provide that opportunity and that transparency for the community. So I commend it to council, and I found the process we went through very engaging and very enjoyable. So I thank the other participants in the discussion.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor McLaughlin.
I agree absolutely with what everyone said. I just have a problem with the date. I had mentioned previously that I would not be back until the 8th of November. There is a precinct meeting at the moment for Hunters Hill for the 5th of November, and I'm just wondering if there's any objection to reversing the 5th and the 19th meetings. Although I would obviously like to be present at both.
What date do you get back? Did you say the 8th?
Yeah.
Are you back on the 8th?
They did that because I'm on.
Oh, are you?
Yeah.
We could potentially have a break week and move to, no, it's getting into late December.
What date did you get back, sorry?
I get back on the 8th, but apparently that's Elizabeth had asked for that change.
What about the 10th of December, if we moved Hunters Hill to the 10th of December? It was the last of the year.
I think you're missing a couple, Andrew. Can we take this on notice and come back with the dates after the meeting?
It was designed to go in between meetings. If you make it
Okay. All right, could I suggest we take the dates on notice, come back and check what everyone's availability is and see if we can find some dates that suit everybody. I think it'd be good if we could all be at these meetings initially for the first round.
That's right.
Until we get the format. Well, what Councillor Williams was talking about before was running it very simply at first, understanding the format, understanding what the residents want, not what we want to tell them, but what they want to tell us. And once we get the format right, we can then do it in a better way.
Thank you.
Is that correct, Councillor Williams?
Yes, that's exactly right.
Councillor Miles.
Mr Mayor, and my apologies for being away when we were determining this. Just for my information, this is a great roadshow to begin the precinct meetings happening. What's the plan for the rollout post this? Is it supposed to be a quarterly or a half yearly exercise?
I think we haven't got to that. We said we'll run the first ones.
Yeah.
The dates also we haven't checked with the incoming general manager. Mm-hmm. So there's a few issues we haven't thought about when we put the dates on it. Perhaps we were a little bit hasty. But we'll find the dates that suit everybody and try to make sure everyone's available before we set the dates. I think that's the best thing we could do.
Yeah, my point being, and I was very keen last term when we had a policy of holding these precinct meetings, and I think we had 2, and they fell off very quickly. And I'm quite keen for these to remain on our calendar and to get out there and do these at least twice a year. I think it's very important. I think that the councillors are singing from the same song sheet, so I'd like to make sure that this is kept up. So,
sure.
Not that we have to resolve it tonight, but perhaps if we can come up with some schedule of happening biannually or a quarter.
Well, I think Councillor Crasso was there, Councillor McLaughlin, Councillor Williams and myself, and I think we said we'll run through the first lot, we'll review what we've done well, and then we'll keep it going. The intention is to keep it going.
If I could just add to that.
Councillor McLaughlin.
I think the point is also that it would be determined by what the residents wanted as well, how often they wanted to meet. Whether they felt they wanted to meet twice yearly or
that's correct.
4 times a year. So that was the initial rollout will determine all of that.
Okay, so perhaps we could add...
In relation to the meeting dates, so that we're clear on what we're doing.
That's what I was going to add.
But I need to ask something about it.
All right.
In relation to the 22nd of October, we had already resolved to move that meeting, our ordinary meeting, to the 29th, because the Mayor, Deputy Mayor and the General Manager will be in Albury at the Local Government New South Wales Conference. So 22nd is out, but I also now have had a couple of requests from a couple of councillors to say the 29th of October doesn't work for them for the ordinary meeting either. So one suggestion would be to only have the one meeting in October.
Council meeting.
Yep. And then we'd probably be able to then have the Henley meeting on
22nd.
the 29th, maybe.
Oh,
So could we deal with the one that's in front of us now and add a note onto the item 3 which says we'll come back with a report, particularly on the dates. So we'll add the dates in there to review the dates, talk to everybody and get the dates that suit everybody. It would be great if we all attended each of the first meetings. Is that...
but I think it's you know,
do it as item 4. General Manager said,
Yep.
suggests item 4,
Meeting dates.
confirm dates.
To be confirmed.
yeah, so at the we want to all be present, all of them, but if it is too difficult, then I think South Ward candidates need to be, South Ward councillors need to be present. You know, well, it is.
Sure, but let's try to get everybody there.
Let's try and get everybody there.
So what would be good is if you could email Annie tomorrow and tell her which of those dates do not suit you.
Poor Annie.
Right, and then we'll see where we go. But it may well be, as Councillor McLaughlin suggested, as long as we can get the ward councillors there, that may well be the best we can do to start with.
Is anyone away for any extended period during that time?
I've already told you,
We've got your dates, yes.
And I have as well.
We got your dates?
I'm away for the school holidays in September.
Okay, well, let's get
October.
your dates tomorrow and make sure we got them.
I may be away for work, but I will check that and get the dates to Annie and yourself.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. All right, so I'll put the motion. Those in favour, against, that's carried. 9.6.
Move the recommendation.
Second.
Move Councillor McLaughlin, seconded Councillor Miles. Any comments, questions? Put the recommendation. Those in favour, against, that's carried.
Record my name.
Councillor Williams against,
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Lacks information as always.
and that's, yep, we'll make a note of that. Thank you. 9.7, report on councillors' briefings, 25th of July. Moved. Councillor McLaughlin, seconded Councillor Cresswell.
Can I ask a question, Mr. Mayor?
Councillor Williams.
Colliers International provided a property report. Where does that go to from that meeting?
That will come to you as a formal report to the next meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I've had a discussion with Councillor Miles about that, and I think we need to spend some time, bring Councillor Miles up to speed on the
Yes, I may, in the committee section, be making some suggested dates, but I would appreciate perhaps sitting down with the General Manager and going through that report, given I missed that briefing.
Happy to do that.
I didn't contribute.
Lachlan, Cresswell,
all in favour? Against? That's carried. 9.7, report on... Oh, no, we've done that one. 10.1. Got some correspondence here.
Move. Motion.
Moved Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor Miles. The first one's a congratulations on the drinking fountain. And the second one is a letter we've just received from Mr. Trent Zimmerman on funding for local sport infrastructure. Councillor Williams.
20 grand.
In relation to that last one you referred to from Mr. Zitterman, I think we're on a bit of a roll at the moment. We should apply with great enthusiasm to see what we can get from that. I'm just curious also in terms of what we were told previously in relation to Council's policy of redacting information about people that have provided comments to council, you seem to have identified Dr. Sharp in both the report and in the email, but redacted any other details. Just wondering why the name is still there.
Email and address
It's
was
the
taken.
email address, councillor.
Yeah, email address.
There's
And,
been in
home
other
address.
cases you redacted the name of the residence as well.
That's if they've requested it. Generally,
Yes.
resident has a right to ask us to redact their name.
And by the way, it's Dr. Sharp.
Well, that's how he put it in.
On the page 1, item 1, email from Dr. Sharp. Thanks, Councillor
Well,
Williams.
unfortunately, Mr Mayor, the staff wouldn't know that because we didn't put the doctor's email is Alistair Sharp and he signed it Alistair Sharp.
All right, thank you. Any further questions or comments?
Just that Dr. Sharp addressed to council at the last meeting, so anyway.
I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you. 11.1, General Assembly of Local Government. There's a very extensive report here by Councillor Williams. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Williams, seconded. Councillor Sanderson. Councillor Williams.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to also table this bundle of papers, which are a whole lot of relevant documentation that came out of that conference. If anybody wishes to have a look through
I'd like to
as to who the delegates were, the full range of motions that were put, the annual report and all the other associated information is all there. I'd like to thank Council for the opportunity to attend the National General Assembly of Local Government in Canberra. I found it quite an inspiring, a surprisingly inspiring event. It was one that was well attended with over 850 delegates, but it was one that was very much focused on issues that are evolving and pressing on councils at the moment. And I have provided a report which I tried to pick out the main issues that were relevant to our environment here in Hunters Hill. But one of the key focuses of the event was localism, the realisation that local government is about local communities and it's not about big corporate processes, it's about providing local service at a local level. And a lot of the issues that were dealt with at the conference were very contemporary and very relevant to local communities. Things like disruptive technology, waste management, local emphasis on employment and opportunities for new industries and numerous processes for communities to be resilient and engage with their communities. Another, I suppose, compulsory aspect to any of these sort of conferences is the parade of numerous politicians spruiking and selling their wares, particularly when there's elections coming up at a federal and some of the states. So a lot of time was taken up by politicians of all persuasions. But one of the common themes that was promoted at the conference, or two of the important themes, was the financial assistance grants and the way the politicians were spruiking their awareness of the suffering which councils are under because of the constant reduction of those financial assistance grants. And the second issue was constitutional recognition. And all but the Liberal Party, the Nationals, weighed in and said they're happy to support constitutional recognition. It's only the Liberal Party that, out of all the politicians that were there, that wasn't prepared to support constitutional recognition. Now, we discussed constitutional recognition around this council table, and my colleague, Councillor Sanderson, provided some very incisive and insightful motions to go to the conference. And I draw people's attention to page 5 in my report, or page 134 in your documentation. And I might add that technology has caught up with this conference. It's the first year they had electronic voting. And you can see on the in the photograph there, the very long bar that represents the yes vote and the very small bar that represents the no vote. Overwhelmingly, I stress overwhelmingly, the conference backed constitutional recognition. Not only did it back it, but it also put a time frame around it, and I guess that's partly to do with myself. I moved an amendment that actually Blacktown supported, that required that within 5 years that the process be commenced and started, because the executive felt that it should be open-ended, but the conference overwhelmingly felt that the executive should get on with it. In terms of our two motions, I do apologise to council because I had organised a seconder, but that seconder, because this was the first on the thing, got the room just a little bit late, so we didn't get a seconder for our first motion, but I'm sure if we did we would have got it up. But the second motion, we got a seconder and we got that up without any problem. So I do thank council for taking the time to submit those motions, because they were very helpful in the process. I won't go too much further, but the finances was a critical issue, and I guess the General Manager's well aware of the problems that we're facing as a local government industry or sector in terms of the financial assistance grants. It used to be pegged at 1% of, I think, gross national, whatever it is. It's now down to 0.5%. And that is a significant reduction right across local government. And all the politicians recognised it, but none of them would commit themselves to resolving that as an issue. I've also listed in here and extracted from the vast number of motions that put up, those that I think have relevance to Hunters Hill. And you might take a moment to have a look at those and see how the broader national local government sees these issues. And many of them do have relevance to what we're involved with. And then at the end, there was a session on, because the national body is a lobbying group or a group that represents local government at the national level, they talked about priorities for the next coming federal election as to what they would be putting to the politicians that are standing in that process. And basically it was around the financial assistance grants and constitutional recognition. There's a whole range of other bits and pieces that not that relevant to us, particularly in terms of transport and those sort of things in rural areas. But I do appreciate the opportunity to attend. I hope what I've written here gives some feel for the key issues that were discussed and talked about, and I'm happy to answer any questions and or bring some of these issues to council in the future. I think the lighting issue with solar lighting was a classic issue that we could get some good returns on. I know we're probably utilising it, but there are a lot of very sophisticated systems at very low cost out there now that would wean us off our reliance on mains electricity and the costs associated with that. A couple of other interesting things was where motor vehicles are heading at the moment. Electric vehicles and automated vehicles may seem something of the future, but according to the conference, and particularly BMW, who presented and had a range of cars that span the full spectrum from electrical vehicles through the various stages right to a fully automated vehicle. And they're talking about particularly e-vehicles, 3 to 5 years before they become significant in the market, and automated vehicles, probably 5 to 10 years, they will become present in the market. And you might think, well, what's that relevance to us? Well, it's going to be a game changer in terms of community, not only in terms of opportunity, but in terms of downside in relation to, they talked a lot about isolation. These sort of innovations remove people to some extent from community interaction, and that's something council would need to be aware of. But particularly in terms of infrastructure, this being a relatively affluent area, we'll probably embrace and adopt this technology quicker than others. And there's some key things that council needs to be considering in terms of its signage, its road infrastructure maintenance and layout that will help or at least participate in this process, because it's one thing to come off a freeway that's got all the right signage and road line markings, and then to end up in an urban area that the car can't find its way around because it doesn't have the appropriate infrastructure. So it's something for us to consider into the future. And the other significant thing that I found really interesting was this issue of drones. I guess we haven't got a drone policy at the moment, but it was quite scary, and the push from the experts there for councils to get on board with a drone policy, because apparently under the legislation we're responsible for any drone, whether recreational or commercial. And so therefore, unless you've got a policy in place that deals with mitigating the risks, council is liable. And that was pressed. And I think that's something we as council needs to consider very quickly as to whether we need a policy. And if we do, there's plenty to grab off the shelf to put in place. So I know I'm going on, but there was a specific workshop on waste, and I found that quite interesting considering the things that we're facing at the moment. And we had the industry association leader there talking about how we're going to have to rethink and maybe focus on specific elements of the waste stream to recycle rather than our broad ambitions at the moment. And that was counter to what I understood where we were heading. And then there were other speakers that really spoke about niche recycling, whether it was batteries or paint or whatever, and all these sort of things. And it all seemed very disconnected. There didn't seem to be threads that pulled all these various stewardship programs together. So I think we've still got a bit of a way to go in terms of recycling. And I think, again, as it did at NESROC when the EPA gave their presentation on waste and where it was heading and the problems with the China scenario, there was some warnings given at this conference too that maybe not everything is exactly as we would like, and we've got to really work hard to make sure that our recycling program is giving the best outcome for our community. So with that, I know I rabbit on, but I did find it exciting, and I do thank Council for the opportunity to attend.
Thank you. Could I start by thanking you very much for your time that you put into the conference. I think it's a very good report, very thorough report, and can I say in a very genuine way, it rivals the reports written previously by Councillor Astridge, on a similar level, but rivals those reports. So thank you very much for the amount of effort you put into doing that.
Thank you, Mr.
Much
Mayor,
appreciated.
and I was well aware of former Councillor Astridge's contributions, so I did try very hard. So I hope I got somewhere near it.
Thank you very much.
Question.
Did say rivalled. Councillor Collins, question.
Yeah, did you actually write this report, the whole thing, or was it just a...
No, I didn't write it. Of course I wrote it.
Oh, okay. It's very thorough. So the opposition leader spoke?
Of course he did. Yes.
I just noticed on page 5 that he gave a strong endorsement for constitutional recognition. Is that right?
Yes, he did.
It's interesting the opposition leader would tell the crowd exactly what they wanted to hear. I do have a question about the motion that we put up. As you know, I don't support constitutional change for local government. I just wonder in a room full of 850 people how you couldn't get a seconder for it. I would have thought, yeah, that would be quite easy to do if it was a good motion. So,
Did you want to answer that,
Oh,
Councillor?
do I need to respond to that, Mr Mayor? I think it was an excellent motion, but sometimes the way the conference ran was a new way, both electronically as well as the way that if there were several motions around the same theme, the executive put up a head motion and then you had to call forward any other subsidiary motions to deal with. And it was just one of those things that we didn't get the right person at the right time. And it was a rather long motion, and I don't think people had time to fully consider it before the guillotine went down. So I do still believe it was very strong. The whole mood in terms of constitutional recognition was exceptionally strong, and it did occupy quite a large part of the conference's activities. As I said, politicians took the opportunity to come and speak. All parties were represented. Even the Prime Minister turned up at the conference dinner after the opposition leader turned up the afternoon to give their speech. Unexpected and not on the program, the Prime Minister turned up and he didn't provide any insight as to what government was prepared to do in terms of constitutional recognition, but some of his ministers did in the earlier discussions. And I do state that the National Party was bold enough to support constitutional recognition, along with the Labor Party and some of the other members represented there.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Williams, I notice you've in boxes put a number of action items. How would you like us to deal with them over the next few months?
Well, as I said, Mr Mayor, there's a host of things that came out of that conference that we need to digest and think about. I've just highlighted a couple of things that come to my mind that we need to think about and consider. And I guess in discussion with the staff, some of these things may come forward as specific motions. Everything from like the National Business Register was there, and we're not enrolled in the program, but they showed me on their computer a very extensive database they have on ABNs, and you can find out exactly where all the businesses are in the area. And I was amazed at how many unconventional businesses we have, that, in other words, those that aren't shop fronts, those that are working dispersed in our community. And I think things like those tools, and a whole range of tools that allowed you to analyse that data and make use of it as a council body. So there's a range of things that I'd like to explore with council over the next few months, which I'll pull out of this, and I just put a couple of highlights in there to bring people's attention to the opportunity.
Do you feel we could workshop some of those outside of a council meeting? Is that a possibility for those action items, considering you have a lot of information on them?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I'm quite happy to, whatever you think.
Well, there's some good items there I think we need to look at, particularly the technology issue.
Yes.
Okay. Councillor Sanderson, would you like to have a comment?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to thank Councillor Williams for the excellent work he's done in producing this report as well. With respect to the constitutional law matters, it's interesting that two matters are quite related there. One's the FAG grants and also the constitutional recognition. That's important. The two are quite linked. In terms of the failure of the first motion, I think in retrospect, if I had my time again to draft that, I might have drafted it a little bit more generally, leaving it more optional as to how far they took it. At the end of the day, it was very specific because it was recommending what had been recommended by the Gilbert and Tobin Centre for Public Law. I think that was that will be the drafting that should anything happen, that I think that'll be the drafting that will be adopted. It was very important though, I think the second motion got up which related to the democratic recognition, and I thank councillors for support at the time that I drafted those. Also note the discussions I had with General Manager at that time, that I believe that's the first time Huntersville Council has taken a motion to the ALGA conference for some time. I'm delighted that that one has got up. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, perhaps we could consider the workshop as part of the motion, Councillor Williams?
Yes, Mr Mayor.
Could we make a suggestion?
Something like a councillor workshop is held in the future regarding action items identified in the delegates' report.
Would that be acceptable to you?
Yes, and any other items which councillors wish to bring from the, I've identified
document.
some issues, but I think on reading, people might find
Right.
others.
So that's a motion. Anybody wishing to speak against the motion? Anybody else wishing to speak for the motion? Any queries? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you very much. Great. 12.1 meetings, various committees of council. Councillor Miles, seconded Councillor Sanderson.
Just one area
Councillor
there,
Sanderson.
at the Public Transport and Traffic Advisory Committee meeting is actually being held tomorrow night, not the 21st.
Oh,
We've already got the papers for it, and they're
Have
quite
to.
clear that it's the 14th, not the 21st.
thank you. Make that amendment. I'll put them.
Question.
Councillor Collins.
Internal Audit Committee, when would that be?
I'll liaise with you and Deborah will work out a date. We've got to notify the chair and we've discussed with the chair when she's available to hold the first meeting. I'd like to think we would hold the first meeting late this month or early next month.
Sounds great.
Do you feel that's something we should hold off until the General Manager arrives?
Oh yeah, sure, that's fine.
Perhaps that might be part of the consideration.
Starts. I wouldn't think so.
First meeting. You want to get on
I
with
think
it?
you could orientate.
No, I think it'll take them a long time to.
All right, so we'll get on with the first meeting, introduce everybody,
Yep.
get started, and then we'll, second meeting, down to action, all right?
Yep.
Okay. So I think we have a couple of other matters to deal with tonight, councillors. You want to deal with this first?
You're going to vote.
Sorry?
You're going to vote for that.
Oh, I'll put the motion. Those in favour, against, that's carried. And deal with this first.
Yeah, that's what we've got to deal with. Yep.
All right, sorry, we've got a late notice of motion. Do you all have a copy of that? And it relates to the Huntersville Rugby Club.
Now, if I could just say, Mr Mayor, that under the Council's Code of Meeting Practice, you cannot deal with this as a notice of motion.
It's a late item.
However, under the code, you can deal with business without notice. If the matter is of some urgency or great urgency, and it's up to the chairperson or the mayor to decide if that's the case. I think the mayor is seeking the views of council as to whether you want to deal with it or not.
Discussion I had with General Manager earlier in the day was that this was quite urgent and there was a time
If I may,
limit. If you could enlighten us on the motion, that would be helpful.
It's been brought to my attention that the Huntersville Rugby Club are seeking to make an application to the Greater Sydney Sports Fund. The fund, applications for that fund, which is $100 million for this financial year across the state of New South Wales, closes on the 28th. Our next meeting of council is on the 27th, and probably wouldn't give us the time to provide the letter of support, or as the motion is put, a letter of support. Now, I am told that the fund requires a letter of support from council to accompany the application for them to consider the application. So the motion is pertaining to the club making an application that is valid and has the opportunity to get a piece of that $100 million worth of funding. So it seems to me like it would be worthwhile for council to support the club if that funding is there. It just seems silly to pass up the opportunity for the club to have an opportunity to get a tranche of funding.
So is it an application just for funds, or is it an application based on a project? Have they got a project they need to deliver?
That's what I'd like for the council and the Hunters Hill Rugby Club to work out. My understanding is that they have to have a project for the application to be for. As councillors would be aware, there is improvements to Boronia Park sports fields being proposed by the club, and I believe that would be what they would be seeking funding for.
So what I'm just trying to understand is, will this lock us into whatever they seek funding for?
No, it gives them the opportunity to raise funds based on capital improvements. If the improvements aren't endorsed by council, I think we could provide general support for the funding being allocated to the club through us for improvements to Boronia Park.
Okay, so what's the deadline?
28th.
28th of this month?
Of this.
21st?
The 31st.
31st?
No, 28.
Well, I was told it was the 28th.
It's 28.
Well, I have a copy of the guidelines here,
Okay.
and
So,
it says the 31st.
Even so, our next meeting is on the 27th, so I don't think that 2 or 3 days is going to give us the time to provide what the club needs. It just seems to me like it's a missed opportunity if we're inhibiting the club making an application for funding.
okay. Well, I don't think we want to do that. What I'd like to be sure of is that in supporting the club's application for funding, we're not giving tacit approval to some plans from the club that we haven't yet seen.
Well, the motion reads, support the application by Hunters Hill Rugby Union, support the application by Hunters Hill Rugby Union Club to the New South Wales Government's Greater Sydney Sports Fund and provide any or all assistance necessary for the club to make a successful submission. I don't think that locks us into the approval of anything other than endorsing their application.
Okay.
On my reading.
Okay.
Well, that was at least the intention.
So we have a mover. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Collins. Councillor,
Are you allowing this? Yep.
I am going to allow it, yes, because of this tight time frame of the 31st of October. So I think we should debate it, and I think we should be clear about what we're approving. If we choose to approve, we've got to be very clear about what we approve. So I think we should debate it.
Could I have a question, please?
Question? Sure.
Because I think there will be a number of questions. Do we get to see what is in the application that the club puts forward prior to it being lodged?
I would, not speaking for the club, but I would imagine that the club and council staff would have to come together to run through the application itself.
I know nothing.
That's what the motion's for.
Well, if someone asks me a question, I'll answer it.
Right. So,
Can I have a second question?
second question? Sure.
I understand that these funds are for capital works. What constitutes capital? What capital works?
Well, the funding could actually be for a number of things. The drainage on Boronia 3, I believe, needs substantial works. There is water tanks that they want to install on Boronia 3 to catch the rainwater for irrigation. There's capital improvements in the plan of management pertaining to the Hunters Hill Rugby Club and to the Pirates Cricket Club and to the Netball Club that we could also use in this application. And yes, there are the potential for the club to provide more community facilities. So there's a whole bunch of capital improvements that could go into that the club the club with the support of council could make a submission on. I think that councillors and I think the general manager, from what I'm hearing, are getting caught up with a unendorsed plan for perhaps building works on Boronia that haven't come to council yet. I understand that, but at the same time, we are inhibiting the club from a substantial tranche of money that is sitting there that will go to other areas of the state, not to the Hunters Hill community, if we don't at least explore the opportunity presented to us to endorse whatever capital works the clubs require. The club may not have approval from council, but they have a backlog of works, as council does, to complete on Boronia Park, and it is not just a community facility or the upgrades to the existing amenities block or a new amenities block. It is drainage works, it is irrigation works, it is works pertaining to other sports clubs that they can also make applications for. So I think that this is well worth talking to the clubs for, because if we don't make this application and we don't support the clubs that are making the applications to this grant, it goes elsewhere in the state.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Miles. Do you have another question? Do you have a question?
To the General Manager, through you, if I may, Mr Mayor. Have other clubs applied to council seeking a partnership along similar lines?
No.
Why do you ask that question, may I ask?
Oh, I'm just wondering because it seems like there would be opportunities for other clubs within the municipality to apply as well. The soccer club and the netball club. And I'm just wondering.
Cricket club.
Cricket club.
The problem you've got is that the projects need to be approved. They either need to be an approved plan of management, or there needs to be DAs or whatever. What this proposal is, it's not actually an application for funding. It's an expression of interest for funding. Okay, very different. If the club is, or anyone is successful in having their expression accepted, then they have to provide a project plan in response. And I note that item 2 of the project plan requires that applicants must demonstrate the project aligns with the council's community strategic plan. Now, my concern here is that we don't know what their expression of interest is for. If it's for things that are already in the approved Boronia Park Plan of Management, we should be able to support that. But if it's for things that are not in the Boronia Park adopted plan of management, then we legally cannot support it.
Well, might I suggest that we just get all of that information and maybe
From the
make
club.
a deliberation?
Well, could I say?
Can we just hold on just a minute, Councillor? Hold on just a moment, please. After you.
Right. I wrote to the rugby club on the 2nd of August. Now, I've emailed this note to you all. You probably haven't had time to read it. But I wrote to the rugby club on the 2nd of August, and I'll quote exactly what I said. My clear direction to HHRU representatives at our meeting, which was held on the 25th of July, was that HHRU must send a formal request in writing to council outlining your various proposals, including a request for any proposed amendments to the POM. Until such time as a formal request has been received, no proposals are able to be considered. When a formal request in writing has been received, council must then make a decision on how it wishes to proceed in accordance with the provisions of the Act, as it relates to community land, the Crown Lands Act, and Practice Note 1 Public Land Management Act, which is now we have to work with. So the club has known since the 2nd of August, Mr. Greppels was at the meeting, what we needed the club to do. I can't be any clearer to them that that's what they need to do. If it's not for some community facility, my note assumes that it's for the community facility, and that's fine. If I'm wrong, that's okay as well, because the same things will still apply. As I said, it's an application, it's an expression of interest. It's $100 million over 3 years, $33 million per year for the next 3 years. What I also found was interesting is that it talks about eligible projects. The strongest proposals will create sporting facilities capable of attracting and hosting regional, state and national championships or professional matches. I don't necessarily think that that's where council would want to go. But another one, which I think is absolutely right up our alley, if that's what they want to do, is to develop environmentally sustainable sport and recreation facilities, such as through installing drainage or water tanks or upgrade lighting. So that's in the current plan of management, and it's not funded. So that'd be great if they went for that. But again, we don't actually know what it is. Then it talks about other things like sport hubs, and it worries me when, as I've said in my email, and because you read it, they talk about the Boronia Park Sports Precinct. There is no such thing as a Boronia Park Sports Precinct. And I wouldn't want the organisation to be writing an expression of interest saying that they're going to form the Boronia Park Sports Precinct.
Can I
First of all, Councillor Miles, just one moment. Could I go back to Councillor McLaughlin? You had a question? Then I've got Councillor Collins. Want to say something?
My questions have been answered.
All right, Councillor Collins next. Councillor Collins.
Okay, yeah, I'd just like to say that this is just an application for money, and it sounds like they've got a whole bunch of things to do if the money comes through, and they can't just go and build anything. There's a process, but this is just applying for a grant.
Expression of interest.
Expression of interest. Yeah. If we don't do it, then we absolutely don't get anything. If we do it, the worst thing that could happen is that the money comes through and then we have to decide how to proceed. So I really see it as a no-brainer to just apply for the money, see if it comes through, and then we can worry about it.
If you wouldn't mind, if I just go back to Councillor
Could I
Miles.
perhaps suggest to the General Manager that point 3 might clarify all those issues that are concerning him, that a briefing is held with councillors, council staff and the Huntersville Rugby Union Club executive.
It's exactly what I asked them to do, Councillor.
It forms part of the motion.
Right?
Yeah.
But I told them 3 weeks ago that that's what they should do.
All right, but hang on a moment. I haven't seen this. The first I saw of it was a quick call from General Manager this afternoon and this tonight. So I'm just trying to get some clarification at the moment.
I apologise for that.
That's okay.
That was not intentional.
No, it wasn't.
I only found out about this today. So
okay, that's fine. So I think we've got a bit of clarification. If so, now, Councillor Williams, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I was just wondering, as a way forward, I'd be reluctant to let any opportunity to get funding slip by, particularly for an area such as Boronia Park, and the importance it plays for a whole range of sports. I noticed that the local members provided $1 million for a range of activities that fall within or could fall within the plan of management. But maybe a way of moving forward with this is that we respond back to the Huntersville Rugby Union Club on the basis that we'd be happy to endorse their application for those items that fall within our current management plan of management. And if there are issues outside of that, well, we're not going to support at this stage, but happy to sit down and discuss and explore the inclusions of those in the plan of management. And if at the end of the process we had an abundance of money available to us, then there's a range of things that could go forward that would improve the sporting capability of that area. And I'd be really keen to support the rugby club in an application, but I think, as the General Manager points out, we need to put a caveat around it that as long as the projects fall within our current plan of management, because we legally can't go beyond that. But I think that item 3 is quite crucial, and I spoke to the club at Mookaboolwa and expressed my interest in finding out more about their development application or the development proposals, because I understand they're quite advanced, and I think it's important as the landowner and as the person that needs to be engaged with, to be engaged.
We don't have any more water for you.
That might, anyway.
Councillor Sanson. Thanks very much.
Can I just
one moment. Is there anybody else who would like to speak? So I think you've made the motion. We've got a seconder. Councillor Williams has a different suggestion. Does anybody else like to speak for the current motion? Anybody like to speak against the current motion? Councillor Sanderson.
I don't wish to speak against it as such, but could I suggest seconding, if it wasn't in fact an amendment, we add a point 4, and that just would be subject to the proposal being consistent with our current plan of management.
You foreshadowing that, or?
Yes, I would.
Okay, well, Councillor Williams foreshadowing. Councillor Miles, thank you.
Can I just point out that in the current plan of management, if the concern is that there is going to be an application for funding for a community facility, that the community facility is in the plan of management, that it is a component of the plan of management. So if the community facility is the issue, it's in the plan of management.
No, it's not.
The provision of a community facility is in the plan of management.
Sorry, Councillor. The community facility that the club proposes in accordance with the current plan is a small amenities building. That's it. The community facility they're proposing is a 2-storey, I don't know how big building between the car park and the netball courts. It's a completely different proposal.
I'm happy to relook at it, but I don't remember stipulating size or scope. I remember leaving it open-ended as to the location and the design and the formula of that
And
facility.
that facility is funded in the grant provided by Minister Roberts at the festival.
Okay, let's deal with what's on the piece of paper if we could. Councillor Miles, if we could deal with what's on the piece of paper at the moment. I don't think we've got any drawings or anything for Bronia Park that council has seen. And this is something that needs to be discussed with all councillors. I haven't seen anything. I don't think other councillors have seen things either. If you have, who's seen these drawings? I haven't. Anybody else seen the drawings?
I've seen concepts, I haven't seen any.
Okay.
I haven't seen any hard
So,
drawings.
can I ask, is it possible that we could get that information prior to the
That is the
31st?
Point 3 is.
And is it possible that we could
Perhaps we could date.
bring
the
this
third-
back? Could we bring this back at that meeting, or is that too late?
Well, that will be too late for them to receive that.
Could I suggest we perhaps give a tentative approval subject to, and maybe delegate some authority to the mayor to decide?
So let me just check. The next meeting is on the 27th, is that correct?
Yes.
And this is required on the 31st or the 28th, we're not quite sure.
Oh, I think I've got it.
So do we have time to see whatever's thought of for the area before that?
Mr Mayor,
Councillor Williams.
I agree with Councillor McLaughlin's thought process there, that delegate the authority for you to issue the supporting letter, and you be guided by the proposal fitting into the plan of management. And whether what Councillor Miles is saying, I think somebody needs to sit down and look very closely at the wording of the plan of management and liaise with the club to find out exactly what their intent is, and then to move forward with delegated authority on the basis that it's legally for us to do as it conforms with our plan of management at the moment. Because I don't want to see this money pass us by, but we do have to go through a process. And it's very hard to understand exactly what the club is proposing at this stage, and I think discussion between the mayor and the club could clarify that for us. And I think you have a very good appreciation of the issue and the discussion around the table.
I've got the document in front of me. It says 31st of August. Our meeting is on the 27th of August. I think we've got time to look at it. I think we've got time to pass this.
Yes, but I do take Councillor Miles's point that they'll want to be planning to put an application in.
I think they can go
won't
ahead.
want to have to race in the last couple of days to get it together. So
I think they
we
can
need
go
to
ahead
give
and do
them
that.
some intent as to whether or not we're going to support it or not.
I think they can go ahead and do their, and we can provide a letter in that 4 days. I don't think that's any problem. But we'll give all councillors an opportunity to look at what's proposed before we hand over the letter. I don't see any problem there. 4 days is a long time. But I'll be guided by you, councillors.
They can always submit their application and put a letter of support in later. That's
Well, no, that might not be accepted. Sorry.
Well, we've got 4 days between the next council meeting and when it's required.
An application for funding.
So, Councillor Miles, could I just check, the reason that you brought it tonight and not at the next council meeting
It's because
was...
the club expressed the view that there was not enough time, that they would not have enough time.
Well, they won't prepare it if they're not going to work on it if they're not going to get our support. It hinges on us actually getting this so they can spend the time to do it.
okay. Perhaps this
So-
might help. Submit an expression of interest. This is publicly available. It's on the website. Submit an expression of interest by 31st of August. Applicants must supply high-level technical and administrative information about the project by 5 p.m. 31st of August. Proposal must include a realistic budget and identify other funding partners. And there's projects over 2 million, but it's not. To submit an expression of interest, they have to do it online. The government will review expressions of interest against the fund objectives and eligibility criteria outlined in this document and assessment criteria contained in the fact sheet. Please read the 2018 expression of interest checklist. I don't think I printed that off.
All right.
But it's they have a lot of work to do over and above getting a letter of support from the council because they must supply high-level technical and administrative information. And again, I would have thought that the council might want to see some of that, particularly what they're proposing to do, before we give them a letter. I think Councillor Williams' suggestion about, well, if it's in the POM, it's easy, but if it's not, then what is it? And the council then must need to decide. So if it's not in the POM, bringing it back to council, as the mayor suggests, gives the council the opportunity to say, well, yes, we're prepared to do it, or no, we're not. So I don't think anyone's... Look, no one loves free money more than me, but it's just got to be done right. And I've worked with this stuff for a long time, and I just need to be very careful.
Councillor Craswell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My apologies, I declined to speak. I thought it had all been covered, but we seem to be going around in circles. So I'm just wondering if we could just change point 2 and 3 around. So have a briefing with the councillors and have a look at what it is, whether, you know, and that then point 3 would be that we provide a letter of support to the club, and that we word the letter to say that you know, this we don't know what they're going to ask for yet, and we're sitting here making lots of assumptions about it, but that our letter of support say that we'll support it if it falls in line with our community strategic plan, or if it's a whole new DA, that it would be pending community consultation and council approval. It's just how we word the letter. That I don't think it needs to be held up. I think it's worded really well. If anything, I'd just swap point 2 and 3 around, because we're not going to provide the letter until we've had a consultation with them to understand more clearly what it is they'd like to do. But depending on what they want to do, it's, you know, that's up to the club. We would support them seeking funding, but what they want to do with it after they get it is really that. Then we make a decision.
So you're making...
hold this up, I don't
So just to... Can I just confirm, you're making that suggestion to Councillor Miles for his consideration?
that you consider swapping 2 and 3, because we won't do 2 until we've done 3 anyway. But
If it assists, it was the motion as written is not timelined. It was intended to be read as whole. It was my intention not to blindly write a letter to the Huntersville Rugby Club to offer them support for whatever they're doing. My suggestion was that we have a briefing with the Huntersville Rugby Club and get an indication for what it is that they are proposing, and that we provide a letter of support and perhaps even guide them in the process so that we have the most successful application that we possibly can. Because, as I said, if we don't make an application for the money goes elsewhere in the state. Why not make an application on the off chance, even if it's not you know, the plans aren't finalised. They have the capital from the Anthony Roberts money that they got 2 weekends ago.
Well, they haven't got it.
It looks like a decent project that a fund like this would look at seriously because it may come to fruition. Why not make the application? Why not support the local club and say, hey, what are you looking for out of this fund? Let us guide you. Here is a letter of support. If we have to say to them, here's a letter of support for the irrigation works and the drainage works, we'll do that. If we can give them a letter of support and they want to put more into the community facility, why not give it a try if that's their intention? I don't understand why we wouldn't give it a go.
Okay, so you're not picking up any of the suggestion from Councillor.
I can change 3 to 1 and 2 to 3 and whatever. It doesn't matter. If you want to change it around, it makes no difference to the motion. I'm happy to do it.
All right. Does anybody like to speak against the motion?
So what motion are we actually
The
considering?
original.
The original
Just
motion.
the original.
Let's swap
Just
them
to get it
around.
done.
Perhaps you should put
Anybody want to speak for the motion as it stands?
the results of the briefing.
Okay.
Yeah, we can support something, but don't know what it is we're supporting.
Can I suggest an amendment?
Yes, you can.
If we could move 2 and 3 around, but number 3 would then become subject to the outcome of the briefing, provide a letter of support.
Okay, are you going to move that, or are you suggesting Councillor Miles incorporate that in the motion?
Following the briefing.
Following the briefing.
Following the briefing.
Oh, subject to
Subject to the outcome of the
because we
briefing.
need to
We're going
know.
to come to something.
I'll support that amendment.
We need to know what they're going to give us. We can't
Councillor
actually-
Miles, would you be happy to make that amendment to that, subject to the outcome of a briefing?
Yes, that's fine.
The upshot of the meeting.
Okay,
The upshot would be, whatever comes out of the meeting,
So that's what I was trying to say by putting the letter last, because then we know what we're writing the letter about.
Councillor Miles, so point 3 would start, am I correct, subject to the outcome of a briefing with councillors, that the council provides a letter of support, basically?
Yes.
Okay, so 2 runs after 3, all in the same paragraph? But the paragraph starts off subject to the outcome. I'll get the general manager to read it back in a minute. Does that make sense to you?
Complete sense.
All right, so
Could I just be pedantic
you can be
and
pedantic?
suggest that we should replace the word application with an expression of interest,
Sure.
because that's all they're doing.
You okay with that, councillor?
What's that? Sorry?
Replace the word application with an expression of interest,
That's fine.
okay? So we support an expression of interest by the rugby club, etc. 2 would be organise a briefing. 3 would be subject to the outcome of the briefing with councillors. That council provide a letter of support to the Hunters Hill Rugby Union Club to accompany their DOI.
All right. So it'll be us being in agreement that we provide the letter at the end of the briefing.
Could we date the briefing on the motion, please? Give it the end date.
Well, we could, if we don't want to
as
wait,
soon as possible.
well, just, yeah. But well, again, can I just say this? If we can agree on a date and not all councillors can come, we should proceed anyway.
Yes.
Yes.
Otherwise, I know now that we'll never get,
Well, let's do the date.
we'll have a problem
Absolutely.
trying to get everybody. So I would be thinking we would try and do this,
Do we have one next Monday?
Code of conduct training.
Yeah.
well, you could do it
We do it
before then if
before
you
that?
wanted to come in at 4:30 or something.
Yeah, or 5 o'clock. It'll only take half
No,
an
you
hour.
won't.
Maybe.
No.
You won't do it in half an hour.
So
Otherwise, you've got to come back the next day.
Question first.
I'd rather
Councillor
not
Miles, do you know if
Monday.
the club has this proposal drafted in any form at all?
I believe that they are working on it, but subject to a decision being made tonight, they are not going to spend much time on it because without council support, they can't get the application approved.
Well, they can, actually.
Well, do you think that might give them enough
I
time
think that
to outline it?
given that they're working on their plans anyway, and given that there is a backlog of projects that some of which pertain to the plan of management, that they would have sufficient information for us. In fact, I think that they've been wanting to do something with council, subject to them getting material quite.
Yeah, well, when you read my email, you'll see that I've already asked them. They say they have plans ready, and I've continually asked them to provide me with the plans,
Yes.
and they yet to provide me with the plans, and I still don't understand.
I'm not casting stones. I'm
Let's
just
go back.
suggesting a briefing.
Just
Councillors, let's go
how
back to
about
the...
Monday, the 20th of August at 4 o'clock?
4 o'clock,
4:30?
so that's an hour and a half.
Yep.
Give it plenty of
Yeah,
time.
done.
Yep. Well, I could get
I don't want to cut them short. I mean,
No.
we're keen to do it, but we need plenty of time to make sure we've got all our ducks lined up.
All right. Councillor Miles, are you happy with that motion? Would you like to write a reply or any comments?
In the interest of getting it up, I'm happy with the motion. As I said, I think that it would be an incredible missed opportunity for the council and the club, given we all know that there's a lot going on at Boronia Park and there are big plans, and that we have a plan of management which we need to fulfil, that it's in our best interest to support the rugby club in their applications. It's also in our best interest to inform the other clubs that this grant is available. But given the Huntersville Rugby Club have taken the initiative and are obviously quite aggressively seeking improvements to Boronia Park on our behalf, supporting them is the least we can do, in my mind. So this is the beginning of what I hope will be a successful process. As the General Manager has pointed out, there is a long process, and it will be subject to further detail being provided to the government. But this is a project, if it is the community facility, that is a viable project because they have funding allocated to it, and if it is other capital improvements, then equally they need doing. So
All right.
I can only say support to support the club. And support
Thank you, Councillor Miles. I don't think there's anybody in the room that wouldn't like to see additional funds flow into Boronia Park. I don't think anybody thinks that. I think we're all in support of that. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, Councillor Miles, for bringing it to us, and Councillor Collins. I think we have one more matter to deal with. Confidential matter. Move into committee of the whole. Confidential. Thank you, Councillor Williams. Who was the seconder? I'm sorry. Councillor McLaughlin. Thank you, sir. Thanks very much. Motion resumed. Councillor Williams, secondly Councillor Sanderson. Just open up the chamber.
The briefing was confidential.
I didn't read about it, I just read it.
It's all very dark out
Phil's not out there.
there. No, it's not working.
Councillors met in committee as a whole. All councillors were present. Council adopted one resolution. The resolution was that the temporary revised organisation structure as attached to the report is adopted. Consideration is given to classifying the two group manager positions in the revised structure as senior staff positions amending the Act in a future report on the organisation structure. Two purposes confirmed the Act in group manager service delivery. And a further report is brought forward to Council by the General Manager regarding the organisation structure within the next 6 months.
Very good. Councillor Miles, Councillor Williams. All in favour? Aye. Against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Any further business, councillors?
Questions?
Any questions without notice?
Heaps. We're Rick out even, councillor.
I wonder in further,
That long.
councillors, I wonder in,
got photos.
We're not closed.
I wonder in further business tomorrow whether we could just have a brief discussion, if you remind us, about the drought situation in New South Wales and how we might have an impact on it. I've had two councillors speak to me in the last week, Councillor Miles, Councillor Williams. I think it's an important issue, and maybe we should consider what we do as a council and as a community in that regard. So, could we have a brief discussion about that?
Yes.
Councillor Miles, Councillor Williams, thank you. Councillor Miles.
Obviously, none of us would have been lost on what is happening in rural Australia at the moment. I think that last week they declared 100% of New South Wales in drought. I had approached the Mayor with the view to making a financial commitment to the drought appeal or the hay runners. On discussion with the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor, I think that there are probably other ways that we can assist the drought appeal. My thoughts were potentially to use organisations in the community to raise funds, or potentially, and I'm not sure of the legalities around this, perhaps the General Manager can give some advice. Were there an option, I'm not sure we can do this, if we could put an option on our rates notices to put $10 towards the drought appeal, if you tick a box, is that something that we would be able to do? Is that something that...
Just missed it.
Just missed it?
Just go ahead.
You know what, I don't think the drought's ending.
Well, is that something that we would be able to do?
Probably not, because it's not an official rate or charge. And that's all the rate notices. We could certainly encourage our residents to make a donation through our newsletter and on the web and Facebook and all those sorts of things. What we need to do though is decide on what organisation we're going to partner with. I think that's a key.
I've had some advice on that, and there are, in terms of the hay runners, there are organisations that are spending more money in the bush than others, and some are chewed up in bureaucracy. So I think we have to be very careful in choosing a charity, because I know that some of the hay running organisations are fantastic and very volunteer based, and it's just people with trucks carting hay. But some of them are highly bureaucratic, is what I'm told, and that they are not getting the resources to where they're needed. So that would be...
As I mentioned earlier tonight, Huntersville Rotary, Rotary has a partnership with New South Wales Farmers Federation, I think it is, with a funding proposal that's all over to the show every day. I'm having a discussion, I hope I'm having a discussion with Rotary the next day or so about an event they want to run here on the 29th. I could also have a discussion with them about what they're actually doing with the money, how's it being distributed, where's it going to, what's the role of the National Farmers Federation, etc. So that's one group we could look at.
The Royal Agricultural Society, well, they're not there anymore. Have we got any contacts there? Well, I do out of the RAS in Homebush, but they used to be based here.
Well, they're coming back.
Are they?
Oh, I think so.
When the new building goes in.
When the building, I assume that's what they're doing, I don't know for sure. Red Cross has got an appeal going. Salvation Army's got an appeal going. I mean, they're all more than reputable organisations, but I think you're right. I've seen some articles too about, what shall we say, now that the government's offered a subsidy for transport, that the actual cost of a bale has gone up.
Yeah. Which is a disgrace.
Yeah, absolutely. And coming from a farming family, I'm real offended with what's happening here, and I'm quite happy to do some investigation for council on what groups we might want to align ourselves with. If you have any particular thoughts about groups, just let me know, and
I'll send you a couple that I've been that I've contacted.
I'm happy to.
Perhaps we can look at it at the next meeting. We can do Councillor Williams.
Yeah, I'm really keen that council does get involved in this process, and as I've discussed with Councillor Miles and yourself, Mr. Mayor, I don't think a cash donation is what we're about. I think as a council we can help lead the community to be generous, and I do like that concept of partnering with Rotary or another established group in our community, because I think both Councillor Miles and Councillor Cresloy mentioned this is not going to go away. We're in this for the long haul. Even if it does rain, our breeding stock's decimated. It'll take 2 to 3 years to grow a cow or whatever and to plant seed. So we've got to react, but I think we can do it in a measured way. And the most obvious thing, if there's a community group already planning and engaged to run a community event, why not partner with them if that's feasible? So I'd support that approach in the first instance, but I think we need to get our thinking caps on and just see how we can have a longer term involvement. I did mention to you, Mr. Mayor, that at the recent Local Government New South Wales Northern Summit up at Hornsby, a range of councils recanted their experience in partnering with a rural council and providing a whole range of resources that may otherwise not be available to those smaller rural councils. And there was examples of, if a planning issue came up, providing some planning support, if a rezoning or whatever, some infrastructure, they might not have the engineering capacity. So a city-based council can contribute significantly, and that in turn can help the community through providing resources they might otherwise. And the other side of it was that they were, all the councils that already have partnerships were bringing kids from the west into Sydney to give them an experience they would otherwise never get.
And vice versa.
Yeah, well, that's true, but there's more a one-way street, that disadvantaged children in rural locations had an opportunity to come to the city, see the beaches and that sort of stuff, which I thought was a more an ongoing process rather than just a drought aid. I do make the comment that I'm getting extremely frustrated in the inability of this nation to grasp the gravity of this problem and to make it a national disaster. And we just talked about there's a range of different agencies or groups out there that are running aid programs, but there's no concerted effort to bring it all together. You don't know how much money has actually been contributed. You don't know where it's going. People are extremely generous. The Joey's football match, they got $70,000 or thereabout. And last week they've raised $110,000. But we don't have any real idea of how it gets to the people that need it. And I think there's a real onus on government, both state and federal, to pull their finger out and actually declare it a national disaster and actually put somebody in charge of the overall thing so that we know where the problems are, we can get where the feed is and get the whole thing coordinated. Because just somebody saying, oh, I've got a truckload, I'm just going to turn up, where do they go? Do they know they're getting to the most urgent spot? So I'm very keen that we make it a council and community event rather than just council donating. Also keen to make sure that we connect with the right group that will make sure the resources get there. But I think it's incumbent on us to really push the issue that needs to be a national coordinated effort here, because there's profiteering by unscrupulous people. You don't know where the money's going. You don't know how much administrative overload is on this. And these poor people just, and it's around future. Like, our prices will go through the roof if we have to import all our food, which is where we're heading in 6 to 12 months' time. We don't have any breeding stock, we don't have any crops in the ground. Where are we going to get our food from? We'll have to buy it in, it's very expensive. Anyway, I've said enough, but I think it's a very worthwhile opportunity for council to contribute broader than just our own community.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Crassell.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I was heartened, Councillor Williams, to hear you speak of the kiddies, because I think in all of this often the priorities of those little people can just sit, because obviously the biggest priority is helping the farms stay viable through financial support and through wheat. I worry about the mental health of the farmers while they're under this burden, and so while I think financial support is great, I love the idea of us reaching out as a community. In fact, I was down in our garage the other day, and we recently moved house, and I found a huge bag of divine dress-ups that my daughter was given from friends and neighbours when she was growing up. And they're pristine and they're absolutely exquisite. And I just thought, how many houses in Hunters Hill have beautiful dress-ups sitting in their attics that we could bag up and send out to the country? Because I know that the priority is money and supporting these farms, but what dad wouldn't just have the joy seeing his little poppets dressed up and running around and laughing when he comes in? And I know it sounds like such a little thing, but I think it's a really personal gesture, and I would personally love to do something like a high tea or something with Rotary or something where everyone brings along their dress-ups and we actually deliver them to the communities, whether it's through a country women's association or whether it's to one of our neighbouring town, which you mentioned, Mr Mayor, earlier. So on top of financial support, which is of course the number one priority, reaching out as a community and recognising, just as we did it as parents, I loved being given these hand-me-down dress-ups from some of the older kids in the neighbourhood, and I really think that there are families in the bush who would appreciate these little gems that are sitting in my garage and in many other garages in Hunters Hill. And that's just the tip of the iceberg of just reaching out a hand of friendship as well as a financial hand.
Thank you, Councillor. Does anybody else wish to add to the discussion? I contacted the Mayor of Richmond Valley today, Robert Mustoe, to see what they were doing. Now, Richmond Valley is we have a friendship pact with Richmond Valley. It's on the wall over here if you'd like to have a look at it after the meeting. The General Manager mentioned it to me the other day, and I asked him what they're doing. He's going to come back to me tomorrow and tell me what they're doing, but they're using some of their trucks to truck hay to some areas out of that area to the western part, because they've got some serious problems there too. 4 years ago, Lydia and I went to a country location in northern New South Wales, and we worked in that location for a period of time doing counselling work with a number of farmers who were suicide risks. It's a major issue for us now that some of these farmers have reached the end of their tether, and I think the small things that come along which brighten their day can avert disaster very easily. So I've seen it work. I know what happens when you go into those areas and do that type of work. I know what happens when you send them gifts. I know what happens when you send them things which are small monetary value that brighten their day. So let's think about it. I'd suggest we gather our thoughts in the next week. I'll have a chat with Rotary. I'll follow that up with Rotary. I'll follow it up with some other organisations during the week, and let's talk about at the next meeting what we can do. This is not a short-term problem. It's not something we have to try and solve in a week, because it is going to go on, as Councillor Williams says, for a very long time. And it will happen again and again and again. It would be good if we get a robust plan of approach to this at some time in the future. So thank you very much for your discussion. We'll look forward to talking next time. Is there anything else we need to deal with except the questions without notice, which we have? Anything else? I'll close the meeting. Meeting closed 10:15. Thank you very much.